Assalamu alaikum and welcome. So here we are talking about genres of literature. So there are genres and subgenres which are included in literature or any form of writing, any form of literature that is there. So we'll be discussing them all alphabetically. First of all, we have adventure story. So the action is main element and main characters usually goes on journey or mission and faces many challenges and choices. Suspense is featured prominently in the plot line. For example, The Most Strangest Game by Richard Connell or The Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R. Tolkien. Allegory. So, allegory is a work with two levels of meaning, a literal and a symbolic one. Characters, objects, settings, and events represent abstract ideas or qualities. Personification, often used in the traditional allegories. Purpose may be to convey truth about life, to teach of religious or moral lessons, or to criticize social institutions. For example, Animal Farm by George Orwell is an allegory. At the same time, Gulliver's Travels is an allegory. Article. So, articles are written in newspaper, magazines, blogs, etc. So, these are written in a journalistic format to give information only, not to give opinion. It tells who, what, where, when, why, and how anything is happening. So, for example, a world turned upside down, or how Black Death affected Europe by Mary Morton Cowan. So, these were articles. Ballads are narrative forms, so they are originally meant to be sung or recited. It tells a story, it has certain setting, plot, characters. Narrator is normally anonymous or impersonal, and this is based on folklore, so like it is handed down by generation to generation from word of mouth, from one generation to another. So these are called ballads. Biography. So, biography is a true account of a person's life written by another person. So, it is always third person point of view. A biographer researches his or her subject to present accurate information. So, biography of any famous person may be the example of it. A biography of Malcolm X, biography of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Blank verse. It is verse composed in unrhymed iambic pentameter lines. Iambic pentameter has 10 syllables, which has 5 pair of 2 syllable, unaccented followed by accented, like unstressed followed by stressed. So there's a feet, which is like a foot is a metrical unit of poetry, and am is a foot, and 5 ams or 5 feet equal to 10 syllables or iambic pentameter. Example, I never understood his love for cats. He said that dogs were too agreeable. So basically इसमें क्या होता है कि 10 syllable होते हैं और 2 syllable के 5 पेयर होते हैं, जिसमें फर्स्ट अनस्ट्रेस्ड और सेकंड स्ट्रेस्ड है. बेसिकली ये जो फीट हैं, जिसमें एक फुट जो है दैट इज़ अ मेट्रिकल यूनिट ऑफ पोइट्री, और एक एम इज़ अ फुट, और 5 एम्स या 5 फुट जो हैं या 5 फीट जो हैं दे आर इक्वल टू 10 syllables, क्योंकि उसके अंदर एक लाइक फीट में 5 पेयर्स हैं ऑफ 2 syllables. सो इन दिस वे दे आर 10 एम्स और एम्बिक पेंटामीटर इसको कहा जाता है. Comedy, which originated in Greek theatre, so it is a dramatic work which is light and often humorous in tone. It usually ends happily and has peaceful resolution of the main conflict. For example, Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream or The Tempest. Also, we have tragicomedy. It is also a genre in which we have tragedy and comedy both mixed in one. and that ends happily. Diary. So, daily a record of a writer's thoughts, experiences, feelings, or autobiographical writing. Journal is another term for diary. For example, A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chestnut, or Diary of a Young Girl, Annie Frank, or Cecily, one character from Importance of Being Earnest, was also keeping a diary which was very famous. Drama. Drama in play form. So it is literature in play form, uh, meant to be performed by actors in front of an audience. So drama is meant to be performed on stage. Characters, dialogues, and actions tell the story. Written form is called a script, and script usually includes dialogues, cast of characters, straight directions. So drama is complete, a manuscript which is meant to be performed on stage. It has all dialogues, settings, and directions in it. Writer of drama is called playwright or dramatist. It is divided into acts, with each act having an emotional peak or climax. And it has climax of its own. And acts are divided into scenes which depict a single time and place. For example, The Crucible by Arthur Miller, The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain, Hamlet by Shakespeare. So these are examples of a drama. Dramatic monologue. Browning was very famous for dramatic monologue. It is a lyric poem in which speaker addresses silent or absent listener in moment of high intensity or deep emotion. Speaker speaks as if engaged in private conversation. Speaker speaks without interruption. Reader hears just one side of conversation and must infer the reactions of the listener. Like My Last Duchess, so we can only hear the Duke speaking and we can only infer what the diplomat may be thinking or making out of it. From speakers' words, readers learn about the setting, situation, identity of other characters, and personality of speaker. Poet focuses on feelings, personality, motivations of the speaker, and T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, or Fra Lippo by uh, Browning, or Andrea del Sarto by Browning, Patriot into Traitor by Browning. Elegy. So, poem written in tribute to a person, usually but not always written in tribute to someone who has died recently. Tone is almost always formal and dignified. For example, Adonis by Shelley, which was written as an elegy to Keats. Editorial. So it is in newspaper, as it is called a newspaper essay, which may also be in magazine or blog. And this gives the opinion of editor. So there are so many editorials which we come across daily. Epic is a long narrative form. It tells about adventures of a hero. Heroes' actions reflect ideals and values of a nation or a group of people. It has massive weapons, massive characters, massive travel, massive tragedy all in one. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, or John Milton's Paradise Lost, and Beowulf, whose writer is anonymous. So these were epic poems. Essay. So essay is short work of non-fiction. It deals with single subject, and expository informs an audience or explains a subject. So in expository essay, there is an explanation. In narrative essay, there is a story. In persuasive essay, it is for convincing purposes. Descriptive tells the description of something. Critical, it tells situation of work of art. Reflective tells writer's own opinions. So, for examples, Of Truth by Francis Bacon is one of the most marvelous essays written in English literature. Fable. So, fable is very brief tale told to illustrate a moral or teach a lesson. Usually, one or two characters are there. Characters usually, but not always, are animals. More appears in near the beginning or end of fable, so it is a moral that comes almost end or beginning of the fable. Oral tradition handed down by word of mouth from generation to generation. For example, Aesop's fables are very famous. You must have listened to the fable of Aesop, where uh, a farmer, his son, and the donkey. So they're going somewhere. So sometimes they sit on donkey, and sometimes they pick up the donkey. So these are having moral lessons. Fairy tales, created for enjoyment and to inspire hope. Common beginnings and endings, like once upon a time, or ends with they lived happily ever after. There is use of magic spells, stereotypical flat characters. They can be good, they can be bad, or like some there is domination of evil, and then finally good conquers over evil. For example, Cinderella is a good fairy tale. Fantasy. So it is type of fiction that is highly imaginative. It may contain some elements never found in real life, and it is similar to science fiction but more fanciful. A less emphasis on technology and more on life forms. Plot might involve magic, the supernatural, or mythological things. Frequently, it is children or the other innocent characters who are able to use the magic. Setting might be non-existent world. Often it is molded after a medieval universe. For example, Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis or Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. They are examples of fantasy. Farce. So it is exaggerated comedy that features an absurd plot, ridiculous, far-fetched situations, humorous dialogues. Its purpose is to keep audience laughing. Humor is physical and slapstick, like pie in the face. Characters usually are stereotypes or simplified examples of different traits or qualities. Comic devices typically are used, including mistaken identity, deception, two people having same faces, wordplay, exaggeration, pun. So, importance of being earnest is example of farce. Fiction. So, prose writing that tells us an imaginary story in which all events might be invented or some parts of the story might be based on real events. So, basic elements of fiction are plot, character, setting, theme. Types of fiction include realistic fiction, historical fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. Fiction includes novels, short stories, poetry, novella. There is historical fiction in that, and there is historical narrative in that. Folklore. So, folklore or folk tales. So, it is the umbrella term for legends, folk tales, myths, fables, or trickster tales. All folklore is fiction that was handed down from generation to generation. It deals with magic, heroes, and adventures. It may be set in distant past, or it may also involve supernatural events in it. Free verse. So, poetry without regular patterns of rhyme and rhythm retains other poetic elements such as figurative language, imagery, and symbolism. Gothic literature. So, grotesque characters, bizarre situations, and violent events. It was originated in Europe and was popular in US during 19th century. For example, Frankenstein was from Gothic literature. Dracula by Bram Stoker was also from Gothic literature. Legends. So, stories about the past usually have some basis in historical fact but can be fictional. Many legendary heroes or folk heroes were included in folk tales. Fantastic details and hyperbole, incredible feats of strength, wit, and intelligence that is shown in that. Supernatural beings or are there, and sometimes animals are there who can talk. For example, Damon and Pythias. So this is a legend. Greek legends were also very famous. Letters can also be of historical value, like they may be from or to a famous historical literary figure, जैसा गालिब के खतूत थे. So they're part of literature. So in this way, many literary figures keep writing such influential letters to many renowned people. Limerick. So limerick is humorous, rhyming five-line poem. It has specific meter and rhyme pattern, like AABBA. Usually starts with there was once a, yeah, there once was a. So this is initially the beginning of such poem. Lyric poetry. So presents personal thoughts and feelings of a single speaker. Most poems other than narrative poems are lyrical poems, and they can be in a variety of forms, can cover many subjects from love and death to everyday experiences. For example, My Madre Patmora, Canon di Shelley. So these are lyrical poetries. Shelley's poems are also called lyrical poems. Magical realism. So it includes exaggeration, unusual humor, magical and bizarre events, dreams that come true, superstitions that prove warranted. So it combines fantastical elements. It has it is combined with realistic elements, with recognizable characters, or dialogues are believable and they somewhat true to life. So Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka is an example of it. Memoir. So it is autobiographical writing. Writer shares personal experiences and observations of important events or people. It's usually structured as narratives using first person point of view. For example, The Way to Rainy Mountain. Mystery. So it presents a puzzle or a problem to be solved. It presents a crime or a conflict that is strange or hard to understand. Plot slowly unravels or reveals clues that lead to solution of the problem. Relevant clues often shrouded with information to distract the reader. Character frequently is involved in investigating wrongdoing. Character may be employed to obtain secret information. For example, Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue. So this is type of mystery, or the tales of Sherlock Holmes. Myths. So myths are legends, or they're fictional tales of ancient gods, goddesses, supernatural beings, heroes. Uh, it was derived from Greeks and Romans. So Greek myths and Roman myths are almost same with different names of the same characters. God and goddesses in them, they were immortals and they had certain superpowers. They also shared the powers with human beings. Sometimes they interacted with human beings or interfered in their lives. They attempted to explain, like myths attempt to explain as human nature and social customs. For example, Pandora's box, the tale of Narcissus, the tale of Hercules and his adventures. Narrative poetry that tells a story in verse form. Narrative poetry contains characters, setting, plot. It is like a little short story but in verse form. May have rhyme, rhythm, or may not, like Barbara Frietche by John Greenleaf Whittier. Non-fiction. So it tells about real people, places, events written to convey factual information. So these are events either based on reality or at least writer considers them to be real. So these are called non-fiction. It also includes newspapers, political cartoons, magazines, blogs, web news reports, public service announcements, movie reviews, advertising, speeches, essays, criticism, interviews, autobiographies, biographies. So Gulliver Travel is example of non-fiction. Novel. So novel which was started in a late romantic time, and it was popular in Victorian age. So it is long work of fiction. Its elements are plot, setting, characters, theme. It has rising action, conflict, turning point, which is called climax, and resolution. It is product of writer's imagination, like writers imagines and writes about certain aspect of society. For example, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens is written at the backdrop of like French Revolution in England and France as well. Novella. Novella is a shorter form of novel, so it is shorter than novel and longer than a short story. So its plot is complex than plot of a full-fledged novel. It has fewer characters than a novel. For example, Old Man in the Sea is the best example of a novella. Parable. So, parable is a brief story which is meant to teach a lesson or illustrate a moral truth. Each detail corresponds to some aspect of the problem or moral dilemma to which it is directed. Parody. Humorous imitation of another serious work. So it has to be imitation of some serious work. Can be in form of drama, poem, prose fiction. So it can be in any form. Like Shamila was a parody of Pamela. It was a novel. Pastoral. So type of poem that depicts rural life, country life in very idealized terms. It also expresses nostalgia for age or place of lost innocence. It portrays rural settings not as they are, but as simple, like as their beautiful, ideal, innocent setting. In a pastoral, the setting is not just incidental, it is essential to the plot, like Christopher Marlowe's The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Play. So, play is different from a drama. It is basically a dramatic performance and it is performed on the stage. The term play is synonym for drama when not referring specifically to a comedy or tragedy. The term play is frequently a less formal description of a performance than is the term drama. So थोड़ा सा difference इनमें है. For example, these may not be including all the directions. These may not be including all the things that are contained in drama. So dramas जो थे वो लिखे जाते थे perform के लिए भी और पढ़ने के लिए भी. So plays are there only for the sake of performance. Poetry frequently uses figurative language. It also uses sound devices, imagery to express emotions and ideals. It frequently can be read on more than one level, and types of poetry include lyric, narrative, epic, free verse, sonnet, ballad, limerick. So, Road Not Taken by Robert Frost and The Raven by Emily Dickinson. So, they are famous examples of poetry. Prose. So, setting takes place in a real modern contemporary world. Setting and plot seem real. Characters behave like real people and use human abilities to resolve conflicts. The plot often deals with growing up, making decisions, facing life's problems. It can be humorous, tragic, or frightening. Romance. So, larger than life story with a hero or heroine. Hero undertakes a quest and goes on a journey issues. Idealized hero usually succeeds in his quest. Romance, beauty, innocence, and goodness usually prevail over evil. Hero often has supernatural powers, or at least near magical powers, like Lord of the Rings and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Satire. Satire is a type of writing that ridicules the shortcomings of people or institutions in an attempt to bring about change. It can be gentle, spoofing, and or savage mockery. It can point out the absurdity and the illogic in a situation. It can poke fun at how someone or a group or people act. Satire always intensely moral in its purpose. Like Alexander Pope's Rape of the Lock is a satire. Science fiction, so its plot includes imaginary events that involve science or technology. It may involve partially true laws or theories of science, often set in the future or past or in an alternate dimensions. Characters are frequently creatures from other words, uses like they come and intervene in the word. Short story is a fictional work that focuses on a single idea. It can be read in one sitting, so that's how a short story should be. One main conflict should be there in a short story, and that involves all the characters, like the happy prince. Soliloquy is a long speech made by a character in a play while no other characters are there on stage. So it's different from monologue in that speaker appears to be thinking aloud, not addressing a listener. So in Shakespeare drama Hamlet, Hamlet's to be or not to be is a soliloquy. Sonnet is typically a lyrical poem with 14 lines. That's written in iambic pentameters, which is a line of poetry that contains 5 iambic feet. Italian sonnets followed Petrarchan sonnets. So the Italian sonnets, they had one octave rhymed ABB, ABBA, and a sestet with CDE, CDE. It was a rhyme scheme. So the first 8 lines are they were called uh, octave rhymes, and then or the part was called octave, and the rest was called sestet. English sonnets, they had 3 quatrains, like that maybe like A B A B, C D C D, like Shakespearean one. Tragedy is a dramatic work that represents or presents the downfall of a character or characters. So, characters' downfall generally occurs because of fate, error in judgment, or personality failure, which may be known as hamartia or tragic flaw. Events linked create cause and effect relation, and they lead to disastrous conclusion, which is usually death, like Sophocles' Oedipus trilogy, which include Oedipus at Colonus, Oedipus the King, and Antigone. In Shakespeare's tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, the tragedy of Julius Caesar. Villanelle. So Villanelle is a 19-line poem. It has 5 tercets, like 3-line stanzas with rhyme scheme ABA, and with final quatrain 4-line stanza of ABAA. So these were famous genres of literature which are there. So we must be knowing all these, and I hope that you understood all these. So thank you very much. Stay tuned.